I didn't lose everything in one moment. It happened slowly, piece by piece, until the man I used to be was gone. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. This isn't the story I planned to tell, but it's the story that won't let me sleep at night. I was 70 years old, sunburned and exhausted, sitting alone on a quiet stretch of sand in Phuket when my life changed forever. The waves were rolling and gentle, the sky fading blue to violet, and I remember thinking for the first time in years that maybe I still had a little life left in me. And then I saw her, Varisa, walking barefoot through the sand like she'd stepped out of someone else's dream, certainly not mine. She didn't have beers in her hand. She didn't even look at me at first. She just sat down nearby, close enough for me to feel her presence, far enough for me to pretend it was an accident. When she finally turned and smiled, something in me cracked open. I never planned to talk about the moment I fell for her. I've avoided it for years. Whenever I sat down to write or record, I skipped it, brushed past it, buried it under the lesson and the warning. But last week, one of you called me out. It was a message from a viewer named Henry. He's been commenting on this channel longer than I can remember. He wrote, "You warn everyone else, but you never say when the trap snapped shut on you. Why?" I stared at that message until my eyes burned. I realized he was right. I've been telling the story from the safe distance of hindsight, never from the moment I fell hard, blindly, willingly. So tonight, I'm doing what I should have done years ago. Before I begin, if you appreciate this level of honesty, even when it hurts, hit that like button. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. It reminds me I'm not just talking to the walls in this empty apartment. All right, you want the truth? Here it is. Let me take you back to the exact moment my life changed, and the mistake that cost me everything. 25 years old with dark hair that fell past her shoulders and a smile that made me forget I was 70. She sat down next to me on the sand and handed me one of the beers without saying a word. Just smiled. That smile. I can still see it now. Sitting here in Alabama, 3 years later, and I wonder how something so beautiful could cost me everything I had. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when I still believed in second chances. My wife died 3 years before I met Varisa. 42 years of marriage, gone in a hospital room on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Cancer. I held her hand until she stopped breathing, and then I drove home to an empty house that felt like a tomb. Our daughter Lisa tried calling for the first few months, but what was there to say? I was alone. The silence in that house was so heavy I thought it might crush me. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and walk through the rooms just to hear my footsteps. I sold the house 6 months later. Couldn't stand being there anymore. Took my pension, took the money from the sale, and bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I couldn't stay in Alabama waiting to die. I met Varisa 2 months after I landed in Phuket. I was eating dinner alone at this beachfront restaurant, some fried rice and a beer, watching the tourists pass by. She was my waitress that night. She brought my food and asked, "You here alone?" I nodded. Most waitresses would have walked away, but she didn't. She asked my name, asked where I was from, laughed when I tried to pronounce the name of the dish I'd ordered. When her shift ended, she came back to my table and asked if she could sit down. "You seem like nice man," she said. Kind face. Nobody had said anything like that to me in years. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about growing up in Phuket, about her family, about working at the restaurant to send money home. I told her about Alabama, about being a mechanic for 40 years, about losing my wife. She listened. Actually listened. When I got up to leave, she wrote her number on a napkin and pressed it into my hand. "You call me," she said. "I show you real Thailand." I called her the next day. I couldn't help myself. Those first few weeks felt like being young again. We went to the markets together early in the morning when the vendors were just setting up, and she'd hold my arm while we walked through the stalls of fruit and fish and flowers. She taught me a few words in Thai, laughing at my terrible pronunciation. "You say it wrong, but it's cute," she'd say, touching my shoulder. We visited temples where she'd pray quietly while I watched the monks in their orange robes. We ate dinner at small restaurants where I was the only foreigner, and she'd order for both of us, always making sure I tried something new. She'd laugh at my jokes even when they weren't funny. She'd rest her hand on my arm when we talked. Small touches that made me feel like I mattered again. After 2 weeks, she started staying at my apartment. It just happened naturally. One night turned into 2, then 3, then she just never left. She'd cook breakfast in the morning, wearing one of my old shirts that hung down to her knees. She'd kiss me goodbye when she left for work and text me throughout the day. Thinking about you, she'd write. Miss you already. I'd never felt so alive. You different from other men, she told me one night as we lay in bed together. Other men, they just want one thing. God. I wanted to believe her so badly, and so I did. When she mentioned her rent was late, I gave her 500 baht without thinking twice. When her phone broke, I bought her a new one. When her scooter needed repairs, I paid for it. She never asked directly. She'd just mention these things casually, almost like she was embarrassed. Oh, my landlord calling again. I don't know what to do. And I'd pull out my wallet and say, how much do you need? She'd resist at first. No, I cannot take your money. But I'd insist, and eventually she'd accept with tears in her eyes and a kiss that made me feel like a hero. This is what love is, I told myself. Taking care of each other. Being needed. I met Tom at an expat bar in Patong about a month into my relationship with Varisa. He was American, early 60s, lived in Phuket for 10 years. We got to talking over beers, and I mentioned I was seeing someone. Thai girl? He asked. I nodded. He took a long drink and looked at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Pity. Maybe. Or recognition. How old is she? He asked. 25, I said. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. And how much are you giving her? The question hit me wrong. I felt my face get hot. It's not like that, I said. She's not like that. We're together. It's real. Tom shrugged and looked down at his beer. All right, man. Just be careful. I've seen this story before. Hell, I lived this story before. Just watch yourself. I finished my beer and left. I didn't need that kind of negativity. Tom didn't know Varisa. He didn't know us. I stopped going to that bar. I had Varisa. That was enough. But then her mother got sick. At least that's what Varisa told me. She came to my apartment one evening with red eyes and tears streaming down her face. My mama, she said, her voice breaking. She in hospital. Very sick. I don't know what to do. She showed me a photo on her phone. An older woman in a hospital bed with tubes running into her arm and an oxygen mask over her face. My chest tightened looking at that picture. I thought about my own wife in that hospital room in Alabama. I thought about how helpless I'd felt watching her die. How much do you need? I asked. Varisa shook her head. I cannot ask you for money. Is too much. But I insisted. She finally told me. 30,000 baht for the medicine and the hospital stay. About $900. I went to the ATM that night and withdrew it all. When I gave her the cash, she threw her arms around me and sobbed into my chest. You, my hero, she whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you. That night, she was extra affectionate, extra sweet. I felt needed. Powerful. This was what it meant to be a man, I thought. To protect, to provide, to be someone's hero. A week later, it was her brother. Lek needed money for school. 15,000 baht. I gave it to her. Then her mother's house needed a new roof. 25,000 baht. I wired it from my U.S. account. My savings were starting to shrink, but I didn't care. I was helping a family. I was part of something bigger than myself. For the first time since my wife died, I had a purpose. That's when Lisa called. My daughter. I hadn't talked to her in months, and hearing her voice made me realize how far away Alabama felt. Dad, are you okay? She asked. Your bank called me. You're sending a lot of money overseas. I lied. Told her it was for travel expenses, for tours and trips. She didn't believe me. I could hear it in the pause before she spoke again. Dad, please be careful. I worry about you. I told her I was fine. Told her I'd call her soon. Then I hung up and stared at my phone for a long time. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but Varisa came home right then with dinner and a smile, and I pushed the feeling away. Everything was fine. I was helping the woman I loved. That's what people in love do. Then Varisa started talking about our future. It happened gradually, little comments here and there that grew into full conversations. "I want to take care of you when you old," she'd say, running her fingers through my hair. "We should have house together, somewhere quiet, near beach. We grow old together." Yes, the idea thrilled me. A home, a real home with someone who loved me. We started looking at properties. Varisa suggested her hometown, a few hours north of Phuket, is cheaper there, she explained. More peaceful. Good for you. She found a house she liked, small, simple, with a garden and a view of the hills. 1.2 million baht, about $35,000. I could afford it if I liquidated some of my investments back in the States. I started the paperwork. That's when she explained the problem. In Thailand, foreigner cannot own land, she said one evening as we sat on my apartment balcony. Is the law, but we can put in my name. We trust each other. Yes? She smiled at me, that beautiful smile that had pulled me in from the very beginning. You like my husband. I never leave you. This our house. I hesitated. For the first time since I'd met her, something felt wrong. A cold feeling spread through my chest. My hand was on the railing, and I remember squeezing it hard enough that my knuckles went white. "Boyd," she said softly, moving closer. She put her hand over mine. "You don't trust me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "After everything? You think I lie to you?" I felt like garbage. Here was this woman who loved me, who took care of me, and I was doubting her. "No," I said quickly. "Of course I trust you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that." She kissed me. "We do this together," she whispered. "Our house, our future." I wired the money 2 days later. The full amount, $35,000. The house was purchased within a week. Varisa's name was on the deed. Mine was nowhere. She showed me the paperwork with a huge smile on her face. "Is ours now," she said, kissing me. "Our home." I told myself it was fine. We were basically married. What difference did a piece of paper make? This was our house, our future. I pushed down the doubt that kept trying to surface. I had to trust her. Love meant trust. But then things started to change. Small things at first. Varisa began disappearing for hours at a time. She'd say she was going to see her mother or help a friend, and then she'd be gone until late at night. When I'd call, she wouldn't answer. When she finally came home, she'd be cold, distant. I'd try to talk to her, and she'd brush me off. "I'm tired," she'd say. "Leave me alone." Then the next morning, she'd be sweet again, bringing me coffee and kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. I didn't understand what was going on. I felt like I was losing my mind, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. Then I found the second phone. It was in her purse, which she'd left on the kitchen counter. But when I moved her purse, I heard something slide inside, and when I looked, there was another phone, newer than the one I'd bought her. When she came out of the bathroom, I was holding it. "What's this?" I asked. Her face changed. The warmth disappeared instantly. "You go through my things?" she said, her voice hard. "You don't trust me? After everything I do for you?" I tried to explain. "I wasn't going through anything. I just found it and..." She snatched it from my hand. "You have no right," she said. Tears started streaming down her face. "I work hard. I take care of you. And you treat me like criminal?" I felt terrible. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry." She locked herself in the bedroom for the rest of the night. I slept on the couch, hating myself. The money requests kept coming. Lek needed a motorbike now. Another 20,000 baht. Her mother needed surgery. 50,000 baht. Her cousin's business was failing. 30,000 baht. I gave her everything she asked for. My bank account was nearly empty. I was living off my pension now. $1,800 a month. Most of it went to Varisa and her family. I was eating cheap street food and staying in my apartment most days because I couldn't afford to do anything else. But I told myself it was temporary. Once her mother recovered, once Lek finished school, things would get better. We'd move into our house and start our life together. I just had to hang on a little longer. One night, Varisa didn't come home at all. I waited up until 3 in the morning, calling her phone over and over. No answer. I was terrified something had happened to her. Finally, I got in my rental truck and drove to the house. Our house. The one with her name on the deed. The lights were off. The gate was locked. I called her phone again. Nothing. I sat in that truck staring at the dark house for 2 hours, and that's when it hit me. I didn't have a key to the house I'd bought. The house I'd paid $35,000 for. I didn't have a key. I drove back to my apartment as the sun was coming up, and I didn't sleep at all that day. A few days later, I went to the restaurant where Varisa used to work. I don't know what I was looking for. Answers, maybe, or just someone to tell me I was crazy. One of the waitresses I recognized was working the lunch shift. When she saw me, she gave me this look. Not quite pity. Something else. I asked if she'd seen Varisa. The waitress glanced around like she was checking if anyone was listening. Then she leaned in close. "She have boyfriend," she said quietly. "Long time. You know this, yes?" My heart stopped. "What?" I said. She pulled out her phone and showed me a Facebook page. Varisa's page, but not the one I knew about. This one was different. Photo after photo of Varisa with a Thai man, younger, good-looking. His name was Somkit. They were holding each other, kissing. Some of the photos had dates on them, dates from when Varisa and I were supposedly together, exclusively together. I felt like I was going to be sick. "I'm sorry," the waitress said. "I thought you know." I left without saying anything. I drove straight to the house, banged on the gate until my fist hurt. Varisa finally opened it. She looked annoyed, not surprised, not guilty, annoyed. "Why you come here?" she said. "I told you I busy." I couldn't find words at first. My mouth was open, but nothing came out. Finally, I managed to say, "Somkit." Her face didn't change. She didn't even blink. "What about him?" she said. "He's your boyfriend," I said. "I saw the photos." She laughed, actually laughed. "You think I love old man?" she said. The words came out flat. "Matter of fact? You think I stay with you for free?" I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. But I thought, she cut me off. "You want young girl? You pay. That's the deal. You knew. You just pretend you didn't." I stood there, frozen. Every word I wanted to say died in my throat. "We're done," she said. Then she went back inside and locked the gate. I heard the bolt slide into place. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, staring at that locked gate. Then I drove back to my apartment alone. I should have let it go. I know that now. But I couldn't. I kept texting her, calling, leaving messages. "Please talk to me. We can fix this. I still love you." She ignored everything for 3 days. Then finally, she responded, "Okay, we talk. Tomorrow. Patong Cafe. 2 o'clock. I showed up at 1:30. Ordered a coffee I didn't drink. She arrived 40 minutes late. No apology, no smile. She sat down across from me like I was a stranger. "What you want?" she asked. I'd prepared a whole speech. About forgiveness. About starting over. About how much I loved her. But sitting there, looking at her cold eyes, I couldn't remember any of it. "Can we start over?" I finally said. "I forgive you. I just want to understand. Can we try again?" She looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Boyd," she said, "you nice man, but you too old. I need real life. You give me money, I thank you. But now, finish." I felt tears burning in my eyes. "What about the house?" I asked. She shrugged. "House is mine. You give me. I don't force you. Was your choice." And that's when it hit me. She was right. I'd given her everything willingly. I had no legal claim, no proof, no contract, no receipt, nothing. I have to go now, she said, standing up. You take care of yourself, Boyd. She walked out of that cafe, and she never looked back. Not even once. I moved into a cheaper apartment the next week. A studio in a rundown building with water stains on the ceiling and cockroaches in the bathroom. My bank account was almost empty. My savings were gone. The house was gone. I couldn't afford to stay in Thailand anymore. I booked a one-way flight back to Alabama. Economy. Cheapest seat I could find. Before I left, I called Lisa. When she answered, I started crying before I could say hello. Dad? She said. Dad, what's wrong? I told her everything, every detail. The money, the house, Varisa, Somkit, all of it. She cried too. Dad, I tried to warn you, she said softly. I know, I said. I know you did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She told me she loved me, told me to come home, that I could stay with her until I got back on my feet. I thanked her and hung up. I walked the beach one last time before my flight. It was early morning, and the sun was just coming up over the water. There were couples everywhere. Old Western men with young Thai women, holding hands, taking selfies, laughing. I wondered how many were real, how many were like me, how many were paying for the performance and pretending it was love. I didn't blame Varisa. Not really. She did what she had to do to survive, to take care of her family. Maybe Somkit too. I was just a customer, a lonely old man with money to spend and a desperate need to feel loved. She gave me what I paid for. The problem was I convinced myself it was real. The flight back to Alabama was the longest 15 hours of my life. I stared out the window most of the time, watching the clouds pass below and thinking about everything I'd lost. Not just the money. That hurt, but it wasn't the worst part. I'd lost something deeper. Some part of myself I didn't think I could get back. When the plane landed in Birmingham, Lisa was waiting at the airport. She hugged me for a long time, and I cried into her shoulder like a child. She drove me to her house and set me up in the guest room. Stay as long as you need, she said, but I couldn't. I couldn't stand seeing the worry in her eyes every time she looked at me. After 2 weeks, I found a small rental, a one-bedroom place on the edge of town, cheap, barely furnished. It was all I could afford. Now I sit on the porch most days, drink cheap beer and watch the cars go by. Sometimes I think about Varisa. Wonder if she ever thinks about me. Probably not. I was just one of many, I'm sure. Another old fool with a wallet and a dream. I don't tell people the full story. When someone asks about Thailand, I just say it didn't work out. They assume I let them. It's easier that way. My savings are gone. The house is gone. My pride is gone. All I have left is my pension and this rental and the memory of who I used to be before I got on that plane to Phuket. I'm not angry anymore. Anger takes energy I don't have. I'm just empty, hollow. I tried to escape loneliness by flying halfway around the world, and instead, I lost everything trying to buy something you can't buy. Love. Real love. The kind my wife gave me for 42 years. I thought I could find it again with a beautiful 25-year-old woman who smiled at me in a restaurant. I thought I was special, different from all those other old men I'd see with Thai girls on their arms. But I wasn't different. I was exactly the same. Just another Henry, just another customer, just another lonely old fool who wanted to believe the fantasy so badly that I paid for it with everything I had. I look back now at all the red flags I ignored. The way she never asked about my life, my past, my feelings. She asked about my pension, about my savings, about what I owned back in the States. The way she'd pull away whenever I talked about anything real, anything deep. The way she'd only be affectionate after I gave her money. The second phone, the disappearances, the coldness. It was all there. I just didn't want to see it, because seeing it would mean admitting I was alone, that I'd been paying for companionship, that the only reason she stayed was the money, and I couldn't face that. So I lied to myself every single day until the truth became impossible to ignore. People ask me sometimes if I regret going to Thailand, if I wish I'd stayed in Alabama. I don't know how to answer that. Part of me wishes I'd never gotten on that plane, never met Varisa, never spent a single dollar or gave her a single piece of my heart, but another part of me knows I would have died in that empty house in Alabama, alone and forgotten. At least in Thailand, I felt alive for a little while, even if it was fake, even if it cost me everything. For a few months, I felt wanted, needed, loved. Even if it was a lie, it felt real while it lasted, and maybe that's worth something. Or maybe I'm still lying to myself even now. I honestly don't know anymore. What I do know is this. If you're sitting in your house right now, alone and lonely, thinking about buying a ticket to Thailand or the Philippines or Vietnam to find love, I need you to understand something. Be honest with yourself. Know what you're buying. Know what it's going to cost. Not just the money. The money's the easy part. It's everything else. Your dignity, your self-respect, the way you see yourself when you look in the mirror, that's what it really costs. And once you pay that price, you don't get it back. Trust me, I know. I thought I was special. I thought I was different. I thought a 25-year-old woman fell in love with a 70-year-old man because of his kind heart and good soul. I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored every warning sign, every red flag, every voice telling me to slow down and think. I wanted to believe I deserved a second chance at love, at happiness, at feeling young again. And someone was willing to sell me that feeling for the right price. So I bought it, and I kept buying it until there was nothing left to give. And when the money ran out, so did she. I'm 73 years old now. I live alone in a rented apartment in Alabama. I have about $400 in my bank account and a pension that barely covers rent and food. I have no savings, no property, no assets, nothing to leave my daughter when I die except debt and regret. I spent 40 years as a mechanic, working with my hands, building a life, saving for retirement, and I threw it all away in less than a year, chasing a fantasy in Thailand. That's my legacy now. That's what I have to show for my life. A cautionary tale, a warning, a story that other lonely men can hear and maybe, just maybe, make a different choice than I did. But I know they won't, because I heard those stories too, before I left. I read the articles. I listened to Tom at that bar. I heard my daughter's concerns, and I went anyway, because I thought I was different. I thought my situation was different. I thought Varisa was different, and that's what every man in my position thinks. That's the trap, not the beautiful young woman who smiles and calls you handsome and makes you feel alive again. The real trap is your own desperate need to believe you're special, that you deserve this, that it's real. That's the trap, and once it closes around you, there's no escape. So here I sit, on my porch, drinking cheap beer, watching the sun go down over Alabama just like I used to watch it go down over Phuket. Except now I'm alone, truly alone. Not just lonely, alone. And I know that's how I'll die. Alone in this apartment, probably on a Tuesday afternoon, just like my wife, except nobody will be holding my hand. Nobody will be crying at my funeral. Just Lisa, maybe. And she'll cry not because she's sad I'm gone, but because she's sad about what I became, what I threw away, what I lost chasing a dream that was never real. I should have known better. I did know better. But knowing better doesn't matter when you're desperate enough, when you're lonely enough, when the silence in your house is so heavy you can't breathe. You'll do anything to make it stop. You'll believe anything. You'll pay anything. And someone will be there waiting to take it. Every last bit of it. Your money, your dignity, your sense of self. They'll take it all with a smile and a kiss and a whispered promise that you know deep down is a lie, but you choose to believe anyway because the alternative is going back to that crushing silence. And you just can't do it. You just can't go back. But eventually, you have to. Because the money runs out, the fantasy ends, the mask comes off, and you're left standing there with nothing but the truth you spent so much money trying to avoid. You're old, you're alone, and you're going to die that way. No amount of money can change that. No beautiful young woman is going to fall in love with you and save you from it. It's just the truth. The hard, cold, miserable truth. And once you accept it, once you really accept it, the loneliness doesn't hurt quite as much. because you stop fighting it. You stop running from it. You just sit with it, let it exist. And eventually, it becomes almost comfortable, like an old friend, a familiar presence, the only constant thing in your life. In the end, I didn't just lose my money. I lost the man I used to be, the man who worked hard and saved wisely and built a life, the man who loved his wife and raised his daughter and knew his worth. That man died in Thailand. What came back to Alabama was just a shell, a ghost, an old fool who learned the hardest lesson of his life far too late to do anything with it. And that's what hurts the most. Not the money, not even the betrayal. It's knowing I betrayed myself. I knew better, and I did it anyway. And I can never forgive myself for that. Never. So, if you take anything from my story, take this. You can't buy love. You can only rent the illusion of it. And the rent always comes due. Always. And when it does, you'll pay with more than money. You'll pay with everything you are, everything you were, everything you could have been. And when the bill is settled, when the illusion fades and reality sets in, you'll be left with nothing but regret and an empty bank account and the crushing weight of your own foolishness. Trust me, I'm living it, and it's a hell I wouldn't wish on anyone. That's my story. That's my confession. That's the truth I wake up with every morning and go to bed with every night. I gave her everything, and when there was nothing left to take, she disappeared. And I'm still here, still breathing, still existing, but not really living, just waiting for it to end, waiting for that Tuesday afternoon when my heart stops beating and this whole nightmare finally comes to a close. Until then, I sit on this porch, drink this cheap beer, and remember the man I used to be before I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand and lost myself forever.